All right, I'll call the October meeting of the Durham Historic District and Heritage Commission to order. It is 7 p.m. It being, I haven't done this in a while, but it being Indigenous Peoples Day on Monday, I'm going to read the land acknowledgement just in honor of that. The town of Durham, New Hampshire wishes to acknowledge the spiritual and physical connection maintained by the Pennacook, Abenaki, and Wabanaki peoples to Nadaka, homeland, Aki, land, Nabi, water, Lolokoak, I'm going to always get this one, Lodowikak, flora, and Awasak, fauna. New Hampshire has been home to these indigenous people for thousands of years. The residents of Durham acknowledge the ongoing hardships endured by our indigenous neighbors after the loss of their unceded homelands, which we now steward. And we will work to foster relationships to support the well-being of indigenous people who carry forward the traditions of their ancestors. All right. Our next item is roll call. Tom, we'll start with you.
Tom Janos, alternate.
Carolyn Singer.
Sally Tobias, Planning Board Rep.
Larry Brickner-Wood, Chair.
Charlotte Hitchcock, Vice Chair.
Michael Hoffman, regular member.
Eric Lund, Town Council Rep.
Aaron Wilson-Slepian, member.
Michael Barron, Durham Town Planner, and Jennifer Becker cannot make it tonight.
And so Tom, unless someone recuses, you're still an alternate, but.
Mostly value in their seat, one or the other, right?
Yeah. The only thing it changes, you don't get any heat from voting at
No.
night. Approval of the agenda. I know there's 2 or 3 things that we probably need to add. And so rather than other business, let's just add those now if it's okay with folks. One is a discussion, Janet, you can speak under public comments, but in order for us to officially vote, we're going to put the recommendation for the location of the Oyster River. We should probably just do that in a formal way. And what was the third one?
The letter.
Letter, thank you. Yes, and we have under item 9 a discussion about the CIP, but Carolyn has drafted a letter of support for options 2 and 3. So I'd just like to formally add that to the agenda. So would somebody, if you're agreeable, make a motion and second that?
I'll move that we approve the agenda as amended.
Any seconds?
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Any more discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Approval of minutes of September 5th, 2024. Folks have an opportunity to read them. If folks have read them and feel inclined, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move that we approve the minutes of the September 5th, 2024 meeting as presented.
Any seconds?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any more discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Public comments.
Do you all have this paper?
Yeah, we did get copies.
Yes.
Thank you, Aaron.
Oh, sorry.
Janet, for the record, would you mind just introducing yourself? Thank you.
Janet Mackey, Durham Historic Association. As it is explained in this 2-page proposal, we were looking to find a good place, a good site for the installation of the new marker by the state that describes the Oyster River Massacre. The history on the placement of this marker, it was placed in 1967 at Coe's Corner originally. Coe's Corner is Dover's too dangerous a spot to have it because of the corner of the curve in the road, and therefore it was moved to the junction of Old Landing Road and New Market Road. And that was fine because cars could pull over onto Old Landing Road to read the sign. But then in the 1990s, the Oyster River Bridge was taken out and a new bridge was installed. And part of that change was the widening of the highway and also the raising of the elevation of the approach to the bridge. And for that reason, Old Landing Road was turned into a dead end. It's just too fast there. So that, being the recent past about the sign that was removed in 2021, we were looking for some place that would be a safe place to stop in traffic, to read the sign, and also to have the sign in a place that had some kind of historical context to the event. I showed you the map last time of where the houses were that were attacked and burnt in the massacre. They're all on the Oyster River on the tidal portion. Even after the settlements had been there about 50, 60 years, there were still no decent roads. There were just really paths. And so people got around on the river. There were no bridges across the river at that time either. There were 2 fords, one at the Oyster Beds, which is, if you know where Bunker Creek is, the Oyster Beds extended in particular on that area across the river between like Deer Meadow and where the end of Bunker Lane is, that area there. And the other ford was down here about 400 feet below the mill dam, which is actually the reason that that dirt road that goes in front of the Sullivan House starts at New Market Road and ends at the river. It's because that's the location of another of the fords. In any event, so we decided that it would be best if we could have the marker placed somewhere where there's a good view of the river, up and down the river. And Nancy and I drove up and down Route 4 and that part of New Market Road near the river. And there's really no place that it's safe to pull over and stop on the highway. It's just too busy and the shoulder's not wide enough. So we're proposing, and our DHA board agreed with our proposal, that we propose to the state that we place the Oyster River Massacre marker at Jackson Landing. There are a couple picnic tables and benches down there on Jackson Landing where there's a tongue of land that extends out into the river, and it has excellent views north and south up and down the river. We propose to the state that we put one of their historic marker ahead signs at the junction of Dover Road and Old Piscataqua Road so that people will know to turn in there. And there's plenty of parking at Churchill Rink area. And then we can have another sign that directs them down to the actual landing. I don't know if the state will go along with this, but I think it's certainly worth making a proposal. And I guess I'm here tonight to explain why we came to that conclusion and ask you to support this proposal. And if you agree, we'll send it to the state and see what they say. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Janet. Since Janet's here, can we just take this item up now?
Yes, I think so. I was going
Yeah.
to actually, can I make a motion that we accept the recommendation of the joint committee of the Durham Heritage Commission and the Durham Historic Association to put the historic marker at Jackson's Landing?
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, been moved and seconded. Anyone, particularly Aaron or Eric, anything to add?
No, Janet did a better job than I would have describing it.
Right. Yeah, and the fallback position here, since my understanding is there's a requirement that the marker has to be visible from a state highway, is to put it, it would be to put the most marker closer to Dover Road, pretty much in front of the Jackson's Landing rink.
Well, our fallback position would probably be to have the marker installed somewhere at the Old Landing Road area.
Yeah,
not-
that would also
right.
be acceptable.
Because at
but-
least there's a parking lot there.
Right, yeah, right.
And-
As a member of the subcommittee that looked at this, we arrived at the same conclusion that the Jackson Landing was the best location that satisfied the constraints. A bit of a historical note, in 1967, when the marker was first installed in the vicinity of Coves Corner, that was the junction of Route 108 and Route 4. Bypass opened a couple years later. So
It opened
the-
around
yeah, so the-
1964.
So the traffic objections that existed in 1967 do not necessarily apply today.
No, the bypass opened around 64, 65.
I thought it was 1969.
Well, we found an old article in our 1967 DHA newsletter that said they hadn't decided where to put the marker after it was installed at Coast Corner, and they said maybe we can put it on the bypass. So it was definitely in existence at least in October of 67.
I think that might have been
So-
a plan at that point. But yeah, you would know
What's that?
actually better than I, but
Janet, Aaron and Eric, I trust your judgment, but you felt Jackson's Landing was a better location than Old Landing? Old Town
Yes,
Landing?
because it's got a much better view up and down the river.
Okay.
Right. As well as accessibility of parking from Route 108.
Yeah, okay.
That is going to be a problem at Old Town Landing because it's not a through connection for vehicle traffic.
Yeah, okay. All right, any more questions or discussion? All right, we'll take a vote. All those in favor? Say
Aye.
All right.
Any objections? Any abstentions? All right, passes unanimously. Thank you, Janet and Nancy.
you.
And thanks, Aaron
And
and Eric.
I have one more comment to make.
Oh, go ahead.
About something else. I've sent a few of you the announcement or the newspaper article about the 200th anniversary of Lafayette's visit to New Hampshire towns in 1824 and 1825. The towns he visited in 1824 had their celebrations this year, of course. And next year will be Durham's turn. And you may want to include something for that in your budget. And then in 2020, Lee, to commemorate the 250th anniversary of 1776. So you may want to do something in 2026 as well.
Okay. Do you know what those other towns did or cities for Lafayette? For the,
Yes, it's spelled out
Oh, it's
in
in
the
that, okay.
Foster's article I've sent to several of you.
okay, thank you.
I can send you a copy too.
Okay.
And the Lee newsletter, it's like Friday updates, but it's
Yeah,
for
just
Lee.
the town
Um,
crier.
They're going to have a parade and several other things, I guess, but they're getting ready for that now.
Okay.
So,
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. All right. And Rachel, still nobody on, Rachel, still nobody on Zoom?
Nobody there.
Okay, thank you. All right, move on to staff report.
which I'm very pleased about. And that'll be, should be on the town council's agenda on Monday, October 21st.
Okay.
And the planning board, that ordinance was initiated by the Housing Task Force,
Yeah, I remember that.
which prepared it and then recommended it to the board. And the board has been working on it for 9 months. It's complicated. There's a lot to this. And there's not a lot of ordinances like this in New Hampshire. This is, in some ways, path-breaking, as Durham often does. So the board has really revised it, wrestled with it. I think it's quite good. And so I'm excited about it, and we'll see what happens when it gets to the town council.
Was there much, obviously there was a lot of work on it. In the final analysis, was there much opposition or disagreement?
Not a lot, but Sally, do you feel like commenting?
I think considering last night was a public hearing on an amendment that involved housing, there were very few people there. There's only 2 people, and they were spoken pretty much in favor of it. I think going through it, we've addressed a lot of the issues and concerns. I assume you're talking about the couple of board members that had questions? Or,
Last night?
yeah,
Well, the vote was 4-2
Yeah.
in favor.
Yeah.
We were a little surprised. So there's some different perspectives about how it should be approached. But again, in my view, I think the board really pressed on every one of these options, and I think that this is the optimal approach that we have. So I'm excited
Yeah.
about it, I have to say.
We really did wrestle with everything, and we learned things along the way. But there was a couple of different perspectives of some things that concern about, really would like to see income verification, which is, we talked at length about income verification, because they were concerned that people that can't afford to live elsewhere may be living there. But income verification is really difficult when you don't have a housing authority to actually do the work, and it could be a dead end for any developer because of the cost involved in it. And we don't want to be kicking people out once they've moved in. So we'll go with that, and if there's more questions about that, we have ample evidence and to discussion to back our choice not to have income verification, more than what the landlord is already requiring.
Yeah.
So is there anything to prevent the parents of UNH students
Yes,
from
yes.
buying it? And
Well, these particular units are rented only,
okay,
and we do have a requirement in there that the landlord cannot accept guarantees of rent, which is typical in these things. So that, and if you're on the lease, if you're signing the lease, you have to live there. So a parent can't just lease for their kids. And of course, it would be under the parent's income that they would be looking at it. And then there's a whole thing about it needing to be at fair market rent, which is a little bit different. So they are going to be looking at people's income, because they need to have a certain percentage below 80% or 80% or below a fair market rent. So they're going to be looking at people's income, because they're going to want to slot some people into these lower end, because they have to average it out. Yeah. So some people will pay more because they,
Impressions, I watched the meeting on Zoom last night.
yeah. Should be interesting, so.
Good. Thanks for your work on that.
Thank you. It's fun.
All right. And we don't know what date the council's going to take it up?
Well, it should be on their agenda on October 21st, Monday, but I'm sure the town council will take their time with it.
Yeah.
There's a lot there.
Yeah,
Right. And we've got a lot of on our plates as well.
that's true.
Yeah.
It is a busy time.
Budget season.
Anything else, Michael?
No, that's good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Item 8, application at 4 Smith Park Lane for window replacement. Replacement of windows on the first and second floors and replacement of clapboards as needed. Application from Bob DeBerto, the property owner, it's map 108, lot 7. We're acting as the Historic District Commission. Mr. DeBerto, welcome.
Thanks.
Could you just say your name? It's more for the minute
Sure.
takers, so they know who's talking.
My name is Robert DeBerto. I'm the trustee of Lono Trust, the owner of 4 Smith Park Lane.
Thank you.
What we have, the house goes back to about 1720, colonial, Senate chimney. Obviously, there was been work done over the centuries. There are some issues, some of the windows, the sills are pretty much shot. They're not really repairable. So the idea is to replace those windows that are, shall we say, non-repairable with new historically correct windows. And so there are 4 on the first floor that meet that criteria. And then on the second floor, there are 2 that meet the criteria with sills being rotted out, and a third one which had been replaced following a fire back, I believe, in the 90s, early 2000s. There had been a accessory apartment at that property with a barn, which the accessory apartment and the barn no longer exist. And then when the repairs were made after that fire, a window was putting in that isn't really compatible with the other windows. So the idea is to put on the second floor 3 windows that are compatible. So It's a total of 7 windows, 3 on the second floor. These are casement windows with the grids similar to what you have here. They meet the new requirements for thermal. I don't know, thermal insulation,
Yeah,
if you will.
the energy.
As well as the life safety, as well as aesthetics and look. So there's 3 on those boards that are not in good shape, that need to be replaced. And also during the window replacement, my guess is that some clapboards will be replaced, and it's not intended to replace all of them, but it's one of those things, it's when you get into it sometimes and you try working, you don't know quite where it'll go. So the idea is to replace it with wood clapboards, cedar, and repaint them to the similar. Same thing with the trim, both interior and exterior. It's going to be wood trim, basically replicating what's there.
Okay.
The idea would be nice to do that this fall. We had a unfortunate incident there back in August with a tenant that died suddenly, unexpectedly. A young lady about 40 years old. And so it's, place is empty, someone is in there temporarily now, but the idea is to get it up to snuff and for both historic and preservation purposes. It's going to take a while. I haven't ordered the windows yet. Michael has seen the order. Their Anderson 400 series is happy with what we're trying to do, and I think he's sort of sent a note giving his approval to that. So it's just a question of getting them on order. How long they take to come in could be 4 weeks or more, and hopefully it's not too cold and we can get them in this fall.
Okay,
And that's pretty much it.
thank you. Any questions?
I wondered if we could just, I went and looked at the house today, and I'm still a little confused as to exactly
Okay,
which windows are
sure.
being replaced. So
If you're on the side of the road, the old road, the paved road going in.
that's the
if
west
you-
side?
the-
Yeah, I
That
think
would be the west side.
Okay,
There'll be 2 on the first floor there.
Right, the 2 either side of the door.
And then if you go around to the side facing the church, the gable end, there'll be 2 on the first floor there.
okay,
And then on the second floor, above those 2, there'll be 2 fire code casement windows that is obviously different than everything else.
Yeah,
And that
Okay.
one may have to be adjusted so it fits in, but that way all the windows will be 6/6. And
Okay,
the
got it.
windows
Okay.
on the second floor and the bedrooms will all be compliant with life safety code.
Yeah, how many bedrooms are there upstairs?
2.
2?
and Mr. DeBerto, that window you just referenced, that was put on after the fire?
Yes.
Okay, so the,
Yeah, it has all the I wasn't here when that happened.
yeah,
But
remember
I
the
would,
fire?
I would dare say that most likely is the case.
Okay.
Because it's more of a modern window.
Yeah, definitely,
And if you look at it, it's a 1/1, and I think there's some vinyl to it.
yeah, okay.
so that one will be replaced to match the other windows?
Yes.
Okay, so it'll. won't
So
look
there's 3 casement fire code windows on the second floor, 2 in the large bedroom, which face, and then 2 facing west. And that should be it for the windows. And then it's a question of clapboards as needed and replacing the trim. That's all flat casing trim.
Any other questions, comments? If not, I entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the application.
I'll second that.
Moved by Aaron, second by Mike. Any other discussions? All right, all those in favor, say aye. Your evening. All right, item 9, the 2025 Historic District Commission Heritage Commission budget. discussion of specific items requested for 2025 operating budget. And then a second element is about the capital improvements plan. So we'll take those separately. So apparently, when the town administrator and business manager reviewed their budget, I wasn't there, so I don't know if they want more specificity, which is, we pretty much submitted what we have done in the past. And it was the exact amount we'd asked for last year. So our only guess is that they wanted more specifics.
Well, you did provide information
Yeah.
here, but it's going to be a tight budget season, and we're probably all going to be seeing cuts. And they thought, it might support the HDC's request if you're able to give some more specifics, if you're able to, rather than just a
Well,
broad number.
I think it's pretty obvious if it's the 250th anniversary coming up, we ought to do something about that.
Yeah.
And then also Lafayette. And I've got to tell you, when I first started hearing about Lafayette, I was pretty, However, I want to say that he took the founding fathers to task over slavery. And he very early on came out against solitary confinement. And if you look at his human rights beliefs, they're pretty significant for
Yeah.
that time period. And I think we should, I think we have the potential again to do some type of programming. The Durham Historic Association had a speaker who had done extensive research on him. He was fascinating. So it's kind of an important story.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that would likely come under our professional services. So on that, I know under what we call general supplies, which is probably the worst term, but that's where the signs are coming out of. And we clearly got plans for signage, and we've also talked about the boundary signs for the district itself.
Right. Do we have an estimate of how much these things cost? And I ask this because our expenditures on this line item have been substantially less than our budget requests. So my guess is that this would be the first place to cut if we do get cut.
Except, I think, Larry, you have made the point participating.
As we
Right,
did
right,
with
which
the
is what the
sign.
contracted services line is
And-
for.
Yeah,
And I think that's smart.
yeah.
And we did use it for the Oyster River discussion, right?
Yes.
So that's a good sample that we do use what we've asked for.
Yeah, and fortunately, we did have that money there. We would have had to ask them for that money. I mean, if it's just a general, we're gonna have to tighten it, everyone needs to cut, I understand that. But given the size of our budget,
Compared to everyone else's.
I guess we can maybe add some wording to it, but I don't, there's nothing in here, and Carolyn's right, we can't anticipate any more than the planning board can that we may need particular expertise on an application or on a project, even say the dam removal or something else around historic preservation. I think that our underspending of our budget is, one, some of the stuff we haven't been able to move forward on, but two, we are conscientious about how we do spend it. We're not just trying to spend it because it's there. So I would hope that, unless again there's a general cut across the board, that we can still advocate for this.
But one thing I have to say now that I'm serving on the Land Stewardship Committee, I can see what other people have for budgets. And
Yes.
I'm going to dig in my heels a little bit and say I think ours is pretty modest and should be funded.
Definitely. Great. Anyone else? So we'll just, our respectful response will be, we feel this is justified. We can add some wording. We clearly are ramping up our signage work. And
We're also working on the planning for exhibits at Wagon Hill
Yes.
Farm when that's done, and some of those
Excuse me.
are going to be exhibits about the farm and its history. So that's another thing we're going to need to have a budget for.
yeah, and that's something that'll come. We just don't know exactly what it is.
Right.
But yeah, okay. Yeah. So do folks feel any need to vote, or just consensus that we can ask that this is the budget we can support and would like to see? All right, and then the second one is around the capital improvements plan, which is a separate document from the budget. And Carolyn had brought to my attention that there's a proposal in it for improvements to the Bickford Chesley House and the barn. And I guess there are 3 options presented in the proposal. And Carolyn, I know you've been talking with Todd, so do you want to take it from here?
Well, I had been asked to present to the town council on October 21 a summary of what we're planning for the Bickford Chesley House at Wagon Hill Farm, and then some of the other improvements. So I'm working on that now, but there are these 3 options available that will advance our work. Option 1 doesn't get us very far, so that's actually not recommended. Option 2 will get us to a 3-season use barn, and option 3 will get us to a 4-season barn. And I don't quite understand why there's a preference for option 2 over option 3 when the amount of money doesn't seem to be that significant. So I'm not quite sure. So I think I've been getting letters of support from various town committees and individuals. And the interesting thing is a lot of people want option 3. They want it done. And I think there's some merit to that.
Certainly.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you specify what is in option 3 that would not be covered under option 2?
I think it's mostly that in option 3 you'd be able to use it in the winter time. That's how I see it, and it's not clear to me, to be perfectly honest. It says option 3 that we'll have a vanilla box barn, and that means a barn that's sort of finished but still needing some finesse. And I'm not sure we're going to get that on option 2. It just seems to me that this site has so much potential for programming that, not to be able to use the barn in the wintertime to have kids come in and, go out in the fields and look for tracks, cross-country skiing. We know that kids use it for sledding. To me, it just doesn't make sense that we don't get it all done at once.
Carolyn,
Okay.
do you know what year this is proposed for?
I think this coming.
This
Yeah.
budget year? Okay.
All right,
Because it
so-
represents the way, since we first started applying for the LCHIP granting, and the town set aside some capital funds, then the cost of everything has just totally multiplied through the pandemic and after. And so it's not enough to do what we originally thought we could do with the funds.
But it's
And
all.
So this represents what we need now, at this time, what we need in order to get the work done.
But it's also, more of the barn and L, the
Right,
monument,
right.
because the LCHIP grant will only fund historic resources. So these options include the more modern additions that LCHIP won't.
Yeah.
Right, and I think in the barn, this includes insulating sprinkler
Right.
systems and then a finished interior surface, so
Right,
that it is
right, yeah,
actually a
yeah,
finished building. Whereas
right, I'm seeing
option
under
2 is like you're still going to be in a barn with exposed studs and no
Right.
air conditioning or heating. Yes,
She wasn't giving you that.
Right, and I see option 3 includes, specifies out the insulation and HVAC, and there are some different details which would presumably be related to having the barn more finished.
right.
It certainly makes sense to me if they're undertaking the project to do option 3, but your letter recommends, should we say that our preference is option 3.
Oh, I would love it if you did that.
I mean, if that's what we vote on. But
I'm curious, though, this is LCHIP will fund option 1 and 2, is that correct?
No, LCHIP, so LCHIP only funds work on the historic part of the house and the L. And the L has a old part and a new part. And then there's the new barn. So LCHIP can only be applied to the house and the historic L.
Okay.
And so.
And the LCHIP money is not enough to do all the work. It's a match against the money that the town has also put in already, right?
Okay.
Right, yeah.
Because my concern, to some degree, we do have other communal spaces. I'm concerned a little bit, we're taking a barn and we're making it a 4-season building. It's a barn. I have a barn, I use it
Well,
all 4 seasons,
it's-
but don't have air conditioning.
It's not a barn anymore. It's,
But is
you
there
know,
a
it's.
need for this space? Is there a justifiable need for this use of this space that justifies a heating system, an air conditioning system?
So I'll do it one at a time.
Yeah,
So where in the town is there any opportunity for there to be substantial historic exhibits, history exhibits?
right across the street
No.
at the
I've-
museum?
No.
Historic museum?
No parking, and they've got a very treacherous stairway.
Hmm.
People cannot go up that stairway. It's very
There's an
dangerous.
awful
And
lot
it's a
Oh.
more
single-
history there, though.
It's also-
There is themed exhibits. For example, I'm currently working on an exhibit on Durham's enslaved population, and its ties to the slave economy. So I have objects from the shoe industry, making brogans, from, you just sent me the article
Oh,
on
the indigo?
Indigo.
Fabric, indigo
and how
dyeing.
indigo is used by local weavers and homemakers in producing textiles. I mean, there's so many different aspects of this that you need, to put up an exhibit that has space and cases where you can talk about this. I've talked with local artists. They want the opportunity to exhibit their work. There's no place in Durham to do that.
There's very small space at the
Yeah.
library.
Tiny space at the
But
library.
it's only open when the library's open.
Well, the library's open quite a bit, quite a few hours compared to how many hours this will be open to the public.
Well, you don't know what it's going to, I think it will be, I think it will be open a fair amount. I wouldn't recommend it if it wasn't going to be open.
Do you think, fair amount is how many hours a week do you think over each, on average for a year?
I would say 4 days a week.
Really?
So any group there'll be different groups putting up exhibits, right?
Right.
And so a group that's sponsoring, say, an art exhibit, they might take responsibility for staffing the building when it's open. And then it can be open as much as they are able
Yeah.
to staff it.
And
Versus-
And I will say that, when I had envisioned this, I was thinking of one-man shows for the artists. Well, there's a benefit to collaborating with people. And as I was having a conversation with one of the artists, she said, we should put together a cooperative and we all take turns manning the gallery space. And I thought that was perfect. Not instead of just having a one-man show, have several artists exhibit in the space.
I just,
And,
yeah.
just for comparison, Portsmouth is taking the space of the Old Children's Museum, and they're turning that into an art center. I mean, what is in Durham that focuses on any kind of cultural, artistic, or historical venue? There isn't one.
Yeah, there's also an economy of scale between Durham and Portsmouth. There's certainly a
Every
world
town.
of difference in the population base and customer base. And so I can see Portsmouth being able to fund something that just doesn't make a lot of sense in a smaller community of whatever,
Well,
a quarter of the size.
I've worked at museums of all different sizes, and we don't have one that can facilitate changing exhibits, and as a result, this community is I think not being exposed to the kind of exciting history that's available for them to learn from.
I'm just fearful of the fiscal impact to the community
Well,
of heating a building. Because I worked in a town, Newington, I'll say it, we've had numerous towns, and a lot of the townspeople were upset by the heating and air conditioning and elevator that sat vacant most of the time.
I'm not sure I'm not sure it's going to be air conditioned. Are you, Charlotte? I didn't think that was part of it. I didn't.
Well, I think
I
it
will
depends a lot on
HVAC.
what system they decide is the best system to use.
But-
If they go with heat pumps, then it'll come along with air conditioning.
Right.
But I also want to say that the town council did vote on this plan already. When they applied for the LCHIP grant, they had to sign off on what we were planning to do. So,
Yeah, and they're really the ones holding the purse strings, so I guess that's really, because there's going to be an impact to the operating budget by nature of more energy use. I certainly would hope it'd be a heat pump system. I hope we're not, putting in oil burners or anything of that sort. But I'm worried about building architecture that needs to be heated and maintained, and everything has a per square foot cost.
but it's already been heated. I mean,
Well,
you've had
there's a
somebody
difference
living in
between
there.
maintaining a barn, well, the barn isn't being
the
lived
barn
in.
Okay, but the barn's different. My focus is on the house, and that's where I put my energy. And
Yeah.
I think it's important to say that the barn is kind of in Todd's realm. I would love to see it available for programming, but my focus is on the gallery space and the historic house.
So in other words, you could see option 2 being successful, and perhaps that's what we can get behind completely, because option 3 has some things that are less relevant to the Historic Heritage Commission. But in the long run, option 3 will allow Parks and Rec to have programs. It'll allow us to host at will on a flexible schedule. So there's a lot of value, a lot of things that could happen here.
And there's one other aspect, and I hate to use the term because it might be dated by now, but I buy into it 100%. And that's the whole thing about social capital and providing opportunities for people in this community to connect. And I just see that as a place. It already is in some aspects, but I think it could be more.
I think, the town's owned that for over 30 years and has spent a paltry amount on the physical structure there, the building. Part of that is we're trying to catch up for not having spent much money on it. But, in addition to the incredible conservation elements of that property, we have this historic building that when we bought it, we should have recognized we were obligated to continue to preserve, not just have it deteriorate. So finally, we stepped up and saying, we know that that's as valuable a resource as the land itself. And it's time to not just keep it at a maintenance level, but to project during the LCHIP review process. We thought there was a lot of potential, particularly for the building. The barn, as Carolyn said, I think has a lot of potential too, but that's a little bit outside of what we manage. But I think it's time to spend a little money on our historic buildings. And this is one of the key ones in town. And it's wonderful because it matches one of the key properties that we own in
Yes.
town. So the combination of those two things, I think, make this somewhat unique.
So say of any one of these options, what's the town's share, what's LCHIP of the $1.5 million for option 1? What is the town's responsibility there?
Well, the LCHIP grant was $280,600, and we matched it with a $20,000 Moose Plate grant, and then the rest is coming from funds that Todd had already allocated for the project.
So it's about 1.3 million or thereabouts for option 1.
No one wants option 1, even
So
Todd.
we go 1.3 to 1.5 to 1.8. It seems like a lot of money to me, it's not centrally located. It's a beautiful property and there are people on both sides of whether we should have preserved it or not. I'm glad we did. but it's not centrally located. You can't bike to it or walk to it. Kids can't go there themselves. It's a car-only. As a matter of fact, one of our concerns has been that it's utilized by a lot of people out of town more than people in town, because
Well-
it is on Route 4.
But that's a different, there are ways of controlling
Yeah.
that. So that's a different, but, how many conservation areas do we have that are not accessible by walking or bike? I mean,
Quite a few,
we
I
live in a
think.
rural area to a certain extent.
I walk one very often, but there are a lot of conservation areas scattered around residential areas where you can walk to from your backyard, or you can bike through, and actually in some cases, they link neighborhoods that kids can take an old Class 6 road from one neighborhood to another. And those have a lot of value in my mind, because it gets kids off of state roads.
I think that Wagon Hill, at least based on just passing by, seems to be one of the most heavily trafficked parts of town, despite the fact that it's not accessible by foot or really by bicycle. I think it has some of the most appeal to people from town, outside of town, for recreation and photo shoots. My sister gets family photos every 2 years. I think that having, a resource there to elevate it just to the next level, from more than just a natural enjoyment to hosting events or having that sort of appeal, is a lot of value. And I also think too that as the HGC, kind of our responsibility is just to weigh in on the value historically of preserving it, not necessarily the fiscal point. There's other, town council and stuff who that's their responsibility, I feel like.
I also think that from a more of a fiscal point of view, that property has potential to earn money, revenue for the town. If Parks and Rec is able to use that for various different types of programming that they cannot provide now because of space issues, that creates an income stream that they can make better use of. And that is one of the big things in the budget season, is how much money can Parks and Recreation earn in town. What they earn is important to our budget. So I think that it's being just wasted sitting there and not being utilized. I think that it needs, I would bring it up to full snuff and make it, I would definitely support option 3, even though it costs more money up front. I think in the long run, it will gain the town money.
The increment for going to option 3 instead of option 2 is about $180,000, if I'm doing the math right.
Yeah, but at first, I mean,
Right, but
it's a large amount up front, but I think it was spread out over time and what the potential is.
The question would be, how many years would it take for us to cover that $180,000 increment? If it's 10 years or less, then it's definitely worth doing. If it would take us 30 years, then that's questionable.
Will that be the discussion you'll have to have at the end? But I do also believe in the social impacts. I've gone by that, and I've always like, why is it like this? Why is it not? This would really be a shining gem to have in this area. And sometimes you just have to put the money out and then do what you can to earn revenue from it. I think there's a lot of possibilities there. Small weddings could be, there's a lot of people that get married there.
I don't want to mislead you, because
But in the barn.
But Todd has kind of nixed that, so I don't want you to.
First of all, no
Todd's only
alcohol
one
can be
person.
served on the
yeah,
site.
That's true,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying.
I'm just saying that sometimes you got to think out of the box.
I'm just being fair, so.
Oh, I'm sure, but I think that there's a more options.
Conferences, small conferences, lots of different.
There's a lot of different things you could do.
I personally feel there are some real potential, and it'll take a lot of minds to figure out how that can be used. But again, I get back to, we spent very little on the preservation of our historic buildings town-wide, and this is really the first venture into it. And this could have been done 10 years ago. Just we weren't there, and thanks to Charlotte and Carolyn and Rich and Michael and others, we finally are getting to take care of a property that we have neglected for quite some time. So I guess the issue, go ahead, Tom.
I just got something, you're talking and everyone's mentioning something. We discussed before about the stairs across the street. climbing those. I know, I've gone up them and I got a bum knee right now, so I'm not even considering it. Wouldn't it be interesting to see that moved up the street to
Yeah,
Wagon Hill?
yeah, it's more accessible.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. I mean, anybody could get in there. Handicap accessible, you know, the draw-in. And financially, that's when there could be something, when people come in the door, there's an actual fee involved. Town people, of course, would get in there with the fact that you're a town. But if you get people, I noticed when you're going up there, I've actually stopped going to Wagon Hill, be honest with you, because it's becoming more of a Massachusetts hangout. No offense. But if you look in the parking lot, a good portion of the cars are all from Mass. I know you can't stop it, but that's the way it is.
And I think that's a wonderful conversation to have. We certainly don't want the DHA to think we're moving them.
No, but
I
you know
think
what I'm
it's a
saying.
conversation that's
This,
worth it.
this over here is great, but they've expanded as far as they can go. I mean, you can't, you know, I look at it and I feel like saying, it's almost like when you're driving down the road and you see these campers that have the push-out signs. Well, that's what they need over here, but you can't do it.
Yeah.
Well, it
Because-
is in the plan, is for them to be part of the rotation
Right.
of the temporary exhibits.
Yeah.
Because-
So a variety of different organizations will have turns to put up on exhibits, and they'll be one of them.
Because it's important to recognize that this space at the Bickford Chesley House is temporary changing area. So exhibits will come in, stay for X amount of time and leave.
But you have the barn.
Well, I just want to say that it's, you know, this is really a museum, and there are storage issues, there are temperature issues, there are a whole host of issues that being a museum kicks in.
No, I understand.
So I
But
would,
it's also a private nonprofit, right, the DHA?
Yeah.
but
See, this points out all the possibilities
There's
that are
possibilities,
waiting to be
yeah.
explored. So, getting back to the letter and our support, how do folks feel about this letter or formal support to the town council for approval of one or more of these options?
I would be in favor of the letter saying, as or some members discussed, option 3 is the preferred recommendation and option 2 as the
As the second
secondary.
choice.
Yep.
And we don't feel option 1 is actually.
we had about the historical marker was that the indigenous groups were in full support of having this happen. I did ask them for a letter of support, but I haven't received one, but they were fully behind having the opportunity to have some exhibit space.
Yeah, I think it opens up a wide for our work around inclusive narratives and inclusive work. So anyone want to make a motion?
I'll move that we support this letter with the addition of the priority of 3 being the preferred and number 2 being the sort of second choice.
I will second that.
Any more discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion, which is to essentially approve this letter with the addition that option 3 is our preference, option 2 would be our recommended second option. Any, all those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, it's 6-1, 6 in favor, 1 opposed, no abstentions. All right, thank you. Plaque for the old brick town hall. Charlotte.
All right, well, I brought the mock-up again, just, it's not as up-to-date as these pictures that you have in your hand, but it does give you a feel for the size. And it is the way they've laid it out, the Franklin Bronze people have laid it out, same size type as what's on here. And so if you want to imagine what it's like to look at this on the wall, this is about the same size as most of the signs in Newmarket and some other places that I've been measuring letters. And this seems to be readable from a few feet away and visible from a distance as a thing you want to come over and look at. and with it justified, and I had shown it with some different paragraphs, but they've thrown it all together into one, and that allowed them to get it almost justified looking, even in the centered version, but it has a little bit more breathing space around the edges, so I think I like the centered version.
I also prefer the ragged center over the justified.
I find it easier to read
Yeah.
rather than have, and I find awkward spacing and,
Yeah,
Full
right.
justification
Those things they call them
sometimes.
rivers,
Yeah.
rivers and lakes between the words,
Yeah.
between from
Right,
line to
right.
You're
line.
talking about the top of them, right?
The top one,
Right,
yes.
right. The top
easier
one
to
is our
read,
preferred. Yeah, the one that's justified on both sides looks to me like a wall of text. People are going to be less likely to read it.
Right.
I do have a question, the brass portion down there, just that mark, that square.
Right, well, I'm
Is
thinking,
that for a QR code, or?
the idea was
That was
to,
the
yes,
plan,
and we
yes.
had some back and forth with the people at Franklin Bronze about how to do a QR code. I'm thinking that if instead of it being a shiny square, maybe it should be a little outline of a square, and then we can create the thing that goes in there and whether, and glue it in. They said they could glue one in with epoxy and that you would be able to move it out.
Their background is kind of like a pebbly finish.
Yeah, right,
So
right.
this might be better for any one thing, because it's smooth, might be better for something
Might
you want
be,
to
yeah, but
stick
should we
on.
not have it be so shiny? Would it be better if we
Oh, it won't be
just,
shiny for long.
that's true, as soon as we put, anyway, as soon as we put something on it, it'll be covered, we can get
Yeah.
a sticker or a little,
That makes sense, that's a
Plastic-
good solution to that
plastic
QR
card,
code
yeah.
dilemma, is just
Something
have a
you can-
space to,
to put on and then you
That's a
can
good
redo
solution.
it if you need to. And there's a few typos. They did not capitalize the town offices, the post office, the police department, and so we'll tell them, and Parks and Rec, all those departments should be capitalized, so that's the one thing we'll have to get them to improve.
So
But otherwise,
if we approve this, and then we can go get the estimates? or-
we've got the estimates
Okay.
already. They
What-
gave us the price.
About 1,800, I think?
I think it was more like 2,300.
Oh, was it?
I
We
can
have
look it
a
up.
budget, though. I
There
mean,
goes the,
we've been planning on
justification for
this.
that budget.
But we've been saving up for it, right?
Right,
Yes, yes.
right. We have
Final
an unexpended
funds.
balance under general supplies that would more than cover this.
So, yeah,
Yep. Because we can get it done in this year and
right.
use some of that. All right, so,
And
How is it affixed on the building again?
it'll be on the side wall that faces towards.
Right, but no, how is it
yeah.
affixed onto
Yeah,
the building?
it comes with studs and the
Drill.
public works people will drill them into the
Okay.
brick
yeah.
and screw the
Yeah, 'cause
studs in and,
I've seen some that it's like an epoxy type thing.
Well, that's what the
No.
studs do, you drill,
Yeah.
if there's a template they give you with a piece of plastic mylar, and it's got a template, and then you drill those holes.
They use a level.
chosen the place where,
Yeah.
where it's going to be put into.
Oh, believe me, sometimes that's a problem, because the studs sometimes are
Yeah,
a little
yeah.
crooked, and you've got one going this way and one going that
Yeah,
way, and
don't
so
go
your
by
plaque.
don't go by
wants
the
to
brick
tip.
line, don't go by the brick line either, because that's.
No, it's a level, but those studs are a little bit, they're not perfect.
so can we have a motion to approve, what would we call this particular one? What would we use?
The historic plaque for the old brick town
Yes,
hall.
and
Center.
we'll call it the top option,
Center
option A.
justification.
Oh, option A,
Option
yes,
A.
they call it option A, right.
So anyone move that?
I'll move to approve option A for the Old Brick Town Hall plaque.
I can't vote, so I can't.
I'll
say.
second that.
All right, any more discussion? And
I'm more concerned about the punctuation.
in
and
concert
spelling.
with this, we're also approving the expenditure.
Right, and we should be able to order it and just coordinate with DPW that they can install it, and we should be on our way.
Right, but the only last thing we'll have to decide is exactly how high to put it up.
Yeah.
You might have some advice about that.
It's
leave
supposed to be
that
eye level.
Eye
The eye
level,
level is
okay.
always a discussion.
Yeah,
All right,
all right,
So you
so
can see it.
all those in favor of approving option A as the sign and the expenditure for it? say
Aye.
Right.
Any opposition, any abstention? All right, thank
A
you.
discussion, we do want to make sure we get proof with that capitalization as we wanted before we order it, because
Yeah.
Right,
Definitely. I
Right.
assume that you all,
Yeah.
yeah.
right, and
Yes.
that is the all have capital
Do you
first
think,
letter.
think the words office should be capitalized, or just town and parks and rec?
You know, you can
I-
argue whether it's technically correct.
Yeah,
I
I had
think-
originally.
Post
thought-
office, it would be capitalized.
Definitely.
Police department, both words are capitalized. I think in the other two cases, town offices and park and recreation offices would not be capitalized, but town would and parks and recreation.
It
Yeah,
feels like it
that's-
would be more consistent, though, to
Yeah.
capitalize them all.
I think
think
it
so.
would be, if you're using it in substitution of a title,
Yeah,
you're supposed to capitalize it. So if you're saying Durham Parks and Recreation Office, Recreation Office is
specific- So the
substituted for Durham
Do they use and?
Parks and
I
Recreation
think they do.
Office. I
And?
guess
Not
that
interested.
office is questionable.
Office seems to be part of this title.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not just referring to an office.
Yeah.
It's part of the title
It's,
of it.
that is a specific entity, a place.
If we
Okay,
said
yeah.
department, that would be capitalized. So the office could also
All right.
be
Yeah.
expressed as
so we're.
department.
Yes.
All right, so that would be right. The first letters of town offices, post office, police department, Durham District Court, Parks, Recreation Office. Will
All
be
capitalized.
All
capitalized.
capitalized.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, it says Parks and Recreation.
Yeah, so Parks, Recreation.
Right,
Office.
right.
Not
And-
the
No,
end.
again, not the
Yeah,
end.
and
yeah.
would be
And is not need to be
lowercase.
capitalized.
Right.
Yeah.
Take the comma away from Durham District Court, you don't need the
All
comma
right,
after that.
Charlotte, thanks for all the work
Okay,
on
you're
this.
welcome.
We're
My
almost
pleasure.
We
there.
have an and.
I'm a fan of the Oxford comma, I'll leave it in.
You like the
I'm-
comment? Completed by 1825, comma, it faced the first New Hampshire Turnpike. Oh, comma, I guess we need that comma, right? Which opened in
Yeah,
1803?
I think we voted
Second.
for that
Yes,
one on
okay.
the
Yeah,
last
yeah, yeah,
round.
that, the second comma on that line is needed.
Okay.
Because which opened in 1803 refers to the first New Hampshire Turnpike, not this building.
Oh, okay. All right,
Yeah,
well, we
it's-
will go ahead and order this.
All right.
I
Nice.
just have one quick question, maybe silly, but is Mary Pickering Burt Kingman the actual name of the person?
Yes,
Yeah.
her name was Mary Pickering, and her sister was the wife of Joseph Coe.
Okay,
So she was Joseph Coe's sister-in-law. She first married Burt, who was a minister of the Congregational Church. He died, so she was a widow, and that's when she acquired the building. But then she married Kingman. So by the
she was a
time,
busy lady.
by the time they sold it to the town, she had the whole name.
Okay, but the
And-
only reason why I'm
and-
saying this is that I'm a kind of person, when I look at something really
Right.
quick, I'm sure a lot of people do too, it looks to me like there's a Mary Pickering and a Burt Kingman.
That's what I thought first.
Right, that's what, I looked at it twice
Yeah.
because that's what I thought.
Yeah, well, we'll include that in the QR code if you
Yeah.
I don't know how else you
Yeah,
can
the
do
exactly.
it.
QR code, you'll
I
get the
mean,
whole
if it's a
history
must-it, it's
of how
there.
Coe was the son of a minister, and then the successor of that minister was Burt, and they're all intermarried, and
So in other words, it wouldn't be acceptable to have Mary P. period,
well,
B.
Janet
period
Mackey
Kingman?
wanted the whole thing.
No,
Janet Mackey says to put the whole thing
you
in.
should have the whole name.
Yeah.
That is, it was at her name. And if you're reading it, the first part explains that is Coe's sister-in-law, Mary
Right.
Pickering Burt Kingman.
Right.
So you should,
Right, so that
If it-
implies that those four
Yeah.
names belong to one
yeah,
person.
it's just about
Right.
reading comprehension.
I honestly
I know
thought
what
it was
it is,
typo
what it
first
is.
too,
I know.
until it was explained it's not. So
And it'll be in bronze.
it'll be,
So-
it is what it is. I mean,
If
if
anyone
anyone
reads
English,
this way, they can go to the QR code and get corrected.
Right.
yeah, that's not a typo, folks.
Or they think it was Mary Kingman and Burt, Mary Pickering and Burt Kingman, and they go
Or
away
both,
thinking it was
or both Coe's sister-in-law.
fine. Yeah, I know.
All right, thank
They
you.
say, well, maybe Burt Kingman was Mary Pickering's husband.
Was that the Kingman Farm? Was that
Thanks for the
Kingman-
clarification, anyway.
But I don't know the details.
Well, the Kingman's name is all over town.
Yeah, Kingman's a pretty.
And Pickerings are all over.
Pickerings are over all over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Every
think I
town's
have
a Pickering
Pickering
Road.
on my.
Yeah.
All right, on item 11, there's proposed ordinance changes around proposed amendments to the Historic District Ordinance regarding purview on town parks and process for tree removal. I remember the third thing I wanted to add. I'll just take it under other business.
Okay.
Has nothing to do with this, it just was, okay. So, we discussed this last time, and well, we didn't formally table it, but didn't take any action. How do folks feel?
So there were two comments I had. When I read this again for the, in preparation, I saw the yard ornaments. And to me, that's a really vague term. And I'm just wondering if we could put a size or something that, sort of further qualifies it. And the same thing relative to any activity. I'm wondering, if you could say any educational or community-focused activity, again, any activity. I like more specificity.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I hear you.
I think it says last meeting too, I just generally don't like B as a whole. I don't think it serves any purpose. I think yeah, so,
Large B
large B and then
Oh,
B11, I think,
and 12.
I said last time, I think is kind of covered by the definition of structures within the ordinance. And then I also don't like the idea of the town not needing to go through the same approval process as other residents. Seems unfair.
yeah.
The town is exempt from most zoning requirements. The historic district ordinance is the exception to that.
I'm okay with that.
The only place where it's an exception.
Okay, well,
I'm okay with having B in there. I think that you're thinking that we shouldn't have B at all?
I think that B11 is kind of redundant based
Oh,
on.
B11.
And then, I don't know, B12, I feel like, I don't really
Right.
understand the purpose of it.
Because
That's, I mean, it looks to me like B is an existing section, and the proposal is to add these two items.
Right.
Okay, I see, okay.
Oh,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Because this came from the bench at the town
bench and
landing.
the tree thing.
And so we kind of thought that they shouldn't have to go through that process. So doesn't it make sense to really make it clear that we want to exempt benches and seating tables and, I don't know about
There
yard
is.
ornaments, but.
There is a difference between a bench that can be moved, like the wooden English-style bench, which was there is one of those in memory of somebody, versus the one that was just put in for, what's her name?
Phyllis Bennett.
Phyllis Bennett, yeah,
yeah.
which was built on a foundation. And so it is more permanent. And I don't know if we want to exempt both of those kinds of things, or,
I do.
I know you do, and I'm ambivalent about it.
Yeah, and I think they may have omitted, I don't know if they did in the end, they were thinking of omitting the foundation because there's no need for it, but I don't know if they did. But because just having a foundation shouldn't make, I mean, we can put a foundation on an ashtray, and it shouldn't really make it a structure.
Yeah, it should.
Well, then, I mean, another approach is redefine structure, because if structure is defined for the HTC as anything in the district built or constructed with a fixed location on the ground, including but not limited buildings, fences, light fixtures, etc. So, we interpret it conservatively. That's why we brought the bench forward.
Yeah.
Right.
So it would be helpful to clarify the policy you want on that.
I think it's good to give, especially staff and future staff who weren't involved in all these discussions, clear directive so that they know they're not stepping out of their lane. I think it's okay to have it. I'm against two ordinances that are too wordy, but I like staff members feeling very comfortable with their decisions. They can base this there. It says it right there. Mm-hmm. I can give this okay and not get in trouble. So I don't mind it being in there. I do actually disagree with the destruction of healthy tree. I worked for Asplin, and we destroyed a lot of trees, made big holes in the middle of them. And we didn't cut the tree down, but we destroyed the physical appearance of the tree for power lines. And that happens sometimes, and I kind of like that term, because it says that you can't mutilate a tree. Yeah, you didn't cut it down, but I don't know, I like trees, and I hate seeing them.
Most of us do.
I hate seeing these holes cut out of them for the power lines, or, I mean, look at the trees in front of the cemetery on 108 in Newmarket going towards.
Oh, the
The
one,
town.
that one,
Yeah,
it's awful,
hideous.
it looks
They're all mutilated.
ridiculous.
None of them are removed, but they're all hideous.
Half
Go
their
back-
head's gone. That's
Go
what
Yeah.
by it now with the foliage, it's even worse.
It's just half a tree all,
Yeah.
all the way down. They're like all these L-shaped trees, and they destroyed the tree. They didn't remove them, but they destroyed them, you know?
So, Micah, you're saying you'd like to keep or destruction in?
Yeah, I would, because sometimes people think, well, we're just pruning it, and no, let's talk about this. Because, the
Yeah.
utility companies are the worst, because they just want to clear a big path so they don't have to do it again for another 10, 15 years.
Yeah, that's a good, I agree with you,
Yeah,
keep
it's-
or destruction in.
Yeah, you're probably better to keep it, because it's true that they will do that. And those trees, I was just driving the other day, and I'm like, oh my God, it's ridiculous. Because you could have taken those trees down and planted lower trees.
Exactly.
And made something look
And,
nice.
and going before a board, whether it's planning board or historic, they would have said something, okay, we need to come up with a planting plan,
Yeah.
something that's going to look
You can make
natural.
you can make it work.
And what's to prevent someone from doing something to the tree to kill it? Because it doesn't fit,
Autopsy on a tree.
Gives us a few outs in different
Yeah,
cases.
yeah.
It's that case in Maine or something.
Well, if they did that,
Well,
though,
I've
that
heard
would
of
be
it.
destruction.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
That would be destruction.
So they can only, technically, if we keep or destruction in, they would have to come get our approval to poison the tree.
Yeah,
And if they don't, we have an actionable item.
but there is
against
that case in Maine.
them. Oh, is there, about
Oh, yeah.
a poisoning of a tree?
They poisoned, a couple poisoned the
Oh,
trees
yes.
so that they could have a better view of the water, and it was their neighbors' trees that they poisoned, not their own.
Yeah, and towns have done soil samples on trees that have mysteriously died before. And because
Oh, yeah.
there is that guerrilla planning aspect where this sign is blocking, or this tree is blocking my sign, and therefore I'm going to poison it one way or another.
So we keep or destruction in, at least within the historic district, we've got some control. If you're
Okay.
not in the district, you're out
Yeah.
of luck with your neighbors.
if it happens, we'll find them. Track them down.
So, what do folks think? You think we're ready to move this forward?
Could go, if we are going to, could we just put some dimensions on the yard ornaments?
Could we eliminate yard ornament and leave
What
in
is the
benches
yard
and seating?
ornament?
I don't know, I always
I mean,
think
I could see somebody arguing that something big and, might not,
Let's just omit yard ornaments, because I'm a little hesitant on that too, because there are some
Okay.
metal sculptors who happen to think their gorgeous number 4 that's 14 feet tall is a beautiful sculpture.
Or a,
And-
a rusty car on a slab
Right,
of concrete?
or a pile of, well, there's a pile of trash in Lee that was a sculpture,
What have you found, right?
and,
But do you want to be reviewing that?
well,
We don't wanna-
I don't want to have this
Deny it.
completely
Right?
exempt. They're completely
Yeah,
exempt.
yeah, there's a difference between putting one of those tacky yard flamingos, which is, yeah, it's tacky, but it's small, versus a 14-foot sculpture or something of that order.
There was a lipstick that was 30 feet tall in Philadelphia. The 30-foot tall lipstick. I mean, that's the yard ornament.
By Klaus
I-
Oldenburg?
It was, it was.
I'd be in favor of taking out yard ornaments. How do others folks?
Yeah,
feel?
I would
think
agree.
leave it out.
I don't think yard ornaments are on the same level as a bench or a table. I think
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
are,
Ridiculous.
because yard ornaments, because I always think of the flamingos, and I
Right. And we want to
It could
avoid
be
having
anything.
anything vague
Yeah.
in the ordinance.
Yeah, that's true.
and then also
Specificity.
relative to any activity, can we qualify that?
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't matter because any act, that's just, because it's exempt. If we were saying what it was subject to, you want to be specific, but any activity is saying it's all exempt.
Right,
But do we want to exempt it all? I
Right.
think is the question.
yeah.
Oh, well, this proposes to exempt everything except a building or roofed structure.
And I don't know if we want to do that. I don't want to give somebody carte blanche to.
That's only in the town properties.
It's
the
only on town
parks.
properties. You're giving carte blanche to the town,
I know,
which could, I mean,
it hasn't,
you
it
have
has
no
not
idea.
been to
Yeah.
our advantage.
you never know. We don't,
That's
Todd
right.
Selleck, the town is not going to remain the same people.
That's exactly right.
And Aaron's point was differentiating between the town and a private property owner, was that?
Oh, yeah, I mean, maybe this is personal, but as a person that lives in the historic district,
Yeah.
and some of the hoops that we jump through to do seemingly minor stuff on
Normal
our
things.
properties that we own, I think that, I don't know, personally, it feels a little unfair. And maybe that is a little too personal to bring up as an argument, but
Yeah, no,
I think that some standards should be
I hear you.
universal.
I'm thinking, why do we need 12? And if to the extent the operation or the activity in that park is going to be exempt anyhow, the same way it would be exempt for a private owner. But if they were going to put up a building or structure, they would come before us. So we've exempted these things in 11, so I'm not sure we need 12.
Yeah, the benches was, I think, the impetus for 12, but
Yeah.
if you're
Right.
covering it under 11,
Right.
then the town would be subject for everything else, fences, walls, retaining walls, pavement, parking, removal of trees, etc.
I think that's good, because, yeah, the town could, have a need or desire to put a propane tank down by, the little brick building, having to apply and go through the process. I think that's
Right.
realistic. Maybe 12 can just be removed.
Right, I'll make the motion to, if a motion is needed, to strike item 12.
I'll second that.
Okay. How about if we make a motion to approve these, and then we'll take it as amended? Or,
No, you can
do you
just
want to rescind that
cross out
motion?
12.
To-
yeah, we can just say we're going to take out 12, and so when we make the motion, it'll be without
Okay.
12.
Without 12 and
Yeah.
without the end yard ordinance.
Yes, without
Those
the
two
yard
things
Right.
will be
Yeah.
struck.
And we're
or
keeping
destruction.
or destruction on item
Yes.
A7.
I'll make a motion that we accept the proposed zoning amendment with the inclusion of A7 or destruction is included in the ordinance, and that under B11 and yard ornaments is omitted, and we'll be striking B12 in totality.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Any second?
Second.
Second by Eric, Mike. Any more discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstention? All right, thank you. So I started laughing because I remembered what I wanted, the third item that I meant to bring up was about the stone walls that Mike
Oh, yeah.
Hoffman had referenced, the property on Durham Point Road and Adams Point Road. And I just thought, and then Mike clarified for me the other property further down on Bay Road. But it just brought up for me, since it's not, particularly it's not within the historic district, but they are protected by the nature of the scenic road ordinance, it's just how we make sure we don't have that same situation.
And I think it's really under the purview of the Heritage Commission.
Yeah,
The stone walls in town are arguably the oldest structures in town. Some of them may date back to the 1700s, many date back to the 1800s. So this is almost kind of the fabric of central New England. It's really only Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine that has these stone wall lined streets. And we've had two houses recently that were, they're in development now. And in both cases, something was done in conflict with the scenic roadway ordinance. Trees were removed and stone walls were removed. And sometimes I think it might be just fully unaware, but I think that most people realize, most developers in New Hampshire know boundary walls are not allowed to be moved. And especially on a scenic road, but there's 2 RSAs and a town ordinance to that effect. I think that sometimes more affluent developers may just do it and ask for forgiveness later, or maybe they have a plan to rebuild it, but there's a process. They're supposed to come before the planning board, not do it and then come afterwards. So I think it's important that I personally, I think that stone walls are worthy of our attention as a heritage commission, and that we maybe have a process to make sure that new homeowners on a scenic road are aware of the rules, that you can't just cut down big trees.
Right, or not just on scenic roads, because my understanding is that there are state law protections for
Well, the
stone walls.
The road, the land in front of your house is not always all yours. It's the town's property.
Right.
You can't cut somebody else's trees down. You need to ask the town, even if it's just asking Public Works, hey, I've got this tree, I want to cut it down, and Public Works says, yeah, okay, on a non-scenic road. But it's not, people think they own to the pavement, and they don't typically. They own to some frontage, which is
Right,
10, 15 feet off the edge of pavement.
Yeah, the right-of-way is typically wider than the actual pavement.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So there's 2 points in the process, at least 2. One is the building permit, and both of these properties they did get a building permit, and then at least one of them was a subdivision too. So in both of those instances are opportunities to make this clear. And then they could still do what they did, but in this case, whether it was ignorance or arrogance, they just did it. The one at Adams Point was an obliteration of the stone wall, in addition to clear cutting the trees. So the other one's is a little more subtle, but I think there are 2 opportunities to try to catch this at the review level, and if they do it, then at least they were told up front. You can't do this.
Right.
This also happened across the street from us on Durham Point Road several years ago, where they just took out the stone wall and cut the trees down.
So just so people know, the boundary stone walls that are on Durham Point Road could very likely have been built with enslaved labor, because that's where a lot of the enslaved people lived and worked.
Yeah. So, I know I was speaking with Mike a little earlier. It sounds like there are some things we can do at both subdivision and building permit to help prevent this.
In the case of a subdivision, the planning board should have had to sign off on it.
Yeah, maybe, it's the kind of thing maybe you're not thinking about it till you see what happens when you didn't. But maybe a note on the subdivision approval or on the plans, and then on the building permit, maybe the same thing.
Right.
Particularly on those scenic roads, but I think that the stone walls are also protected by state statute.
Yeah, I think that's Larry and I talked about it today. I will make a note that with any development on one of the 5 scenic roads, that we just have a standard note on there that, Durham Point Road, Bay Road, et cetera, is a designated scenic road, and there's protections, et cetera, for stone walls and trees in the right of way. So I'll make that a standard note, and I've asked Audrey if we can do that on the building permit applications, and hopefully we can do that there too. The site on Adams Point Road, I've spoken with the owner, and let him know that they need approval from the planning board for the removal of the stone wall, except a portion where the driveway went. I don't know that they've cut trees in the right of way. They may or may not have, but he wants to remove a half a dozen pine trees, and he can request that. So should be going to the planning board for their next main meeting on November 13th. It's a public hearing, and so that will be a request from this property owner for after the fact approval for the stone wall. He's stockpiled the stones. He said that he will place them back. He'll do that properly, but that should be done under the supervision of the planning board. So they'll look at that. And if he wants to request removal of the trees, he can ask the planning board for that approval. I don't know whether they would grant that or not.
Well, he's already taken them down, so.
If he's taken any down there.
Well, he's clear cut
Oh,
the
within-
front.
within the
I mean,
right of way?
Yes.
Oh, they're
Okay.
gone.
There's not
So-
a stitch of,
Yeah.
and maybe, if they weren't in the right of way, then that right of way is pretty narrow. But it's like after the fact thing, and that's what happened across from us. So there was a landscaping plan proposed, but it's never gonna be. So part of it's like, how do we prevent that in the future? This guy will have to come, this person will have to come and get approval, and, you know, if the planning board thinks they need a landscaping plan. I mean, I ride my bike by there all the, it's noticeable. I had never thought about the stone wall, but, you know, it's noticeable, because you know, it's one of the those two lots that we talked, or two bare spots now on Durham Point Road that clearly weren't there before.
Well, in the case that was across the street from your house about 10, 15 years ago, the planning board did require a full planting scheme, which included, I'd say, better than a dozen trees that had to be at least something like 10 feet high each on when they were planted.
Yeah.
So there was a reforestation plan that was required because he cut before, without the approval.
Yeah, well, also, in that one, the subdivision approval did say no cutting of trees.
That's true.
So we actually violated that.
Yeah.
So it was a little different, but I think there's more proactive things we can do. So.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things it happens, you know, there was a subdivision that was approved for this new lot at Adams Point Road and Durham Point Road a year or so ago, and the parcel's actually very large. There's a large piece that is in conservation by the Nature Conservancy, and then there's also a pond on it, and there's a 100-foot wetland buffer. And the applicant is well aware of that. All of that is very clearly marked, very clear. But so that left a buildable area in the corner that's quite small, you know, but large enough that the planning board probably would have had a hard time to deny it. You know, if it was 1,000 square feet, obviously you can't build there. If it's 8,000 square feet, it'd be very hard for a planning board to deny it when there is a buildable area. But unfortunately, you know, for all the good environmental benefits at the back of the lot, it pushed development to a very small corner right at the front. There's no protection for, you know, clear cutting in the buildable area, which the applicant could do. So, you know, I don't know how much was cut in the right of way. It sounds
Yeah,
like.
it's
Yeah, okay,
obliterated
so it's all
the right of
clear,
way. It's
all
nothing,
clear.
there's no trees there.
Right.
And there were.
Yeah, so I mean, even if they did retain those trees, it would still be pretty prominent because it's pushed a large house, dense development in that corner. But hopefully, the planning board will deal with this, you know, with care on the 13th.
Is that property that at Adams Point that we approved last year, that?
Yeah. at
Yeah, it's
Adams
right
Point
there on the
Road.
corner.
Yeah, yeah.
And, you know, the applicant is building a pretty big house with a pretty large overall footprint. So,
Which we'll see now because the trees aren't there.
it will be prominent, it will be prominent.
Anyway, thanks, Mike, for flagging
So
this.
the one thing I want to mention is I think that it's not just the scenic roads, it's all boundary walls, because even if
Yeah,
it was
all
on
walls.
108,
Yeah,
108 actually has a lot more people who appreciate and get to see the stone walls. And some of the stone walls are magnificent in front of the dog pound. It's a beautiful stone wall. But all those are boundary walls. If they're on the right-of-way boundary between the state right-of-way or the town right-of-way, it's still a boundary wall. And I really think it's important we try and preserve these,
But you
protect
did
them.
that
And
presentation.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
See, they are, vote me in as.
Oh, thank you, yes, and we even added that to the agenda. Thank you for stepping up, Carolyn. Could we formally vote to appoint?
Okay, I make a motion that we appoint Carolyn Singer to be the HDC representative on the Land Stewardship Committee.
There a second?
Second.
All right, we won't even discuss it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions? Thank you, Carolyn. There's no term to it that I know of, so.
It's a lifetime appointment.
It's life without parole.
It can be a lifetime appointment.
Yeah.
I was on it and it just kept going and going. It's fine.
You're on till you're not.
You're on until you have to just say, please, I can't do
I guess
it
if
anymore.
you step down from the commission, you technically But they wouldn't even know that, so you could keep going to the.
Yeah, as long
I
as you're
still kept getting
cogent,
the
you're staying
emails
on
for
it.
a year after I stepped down.